Recording, got music. I'll make this into presentation mode. I knew I forgot something. There we are. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to people around the world. This is Martin Hubel, your erstwhile host of the Db2Night show. Once again, we have another show, and I've got the number wrong on top there. I knew I had to change something. Gosh golly, wouldn't you know? It's I'm going to go in and fix that right now because this is kind of almost important here. This is show number Z124. Thank you. We'll put that back up. There we are. Our 124th show for DB2 on Z. We've done well over 200 for DB2LUW. Of course, our primary founder of the show is DBI Software, and they are an LUW vendor, so that'd be the case there. Carrying on, our special guest is Haakon Roberts, the CTO of Data and AI on DB2 on Z. How are you today, Haakon?
I'm very well, thank you, Martin. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you back. I always like it when we have our great popular guests come back and see us again. Moving along, get the admin out of the way. Twitter, hashtag Db2Night is the best way to find out quickly about DB2 information. Make sure you follow that hashtag and you'll be one of the first to know. Our LinkedIn group is there for if people have suggestions. We look at that and see if there are things we need to do. And the replays on YouTube are becoming more and more popular. If you follow our Db2Night show channel, you'll also be able to be one of the first to get the replays of the various shows. And it's a convenient way of doing it. It doesn't take any space up on your hard drive. There's our famous disclaimers and copyrights. We respect people's trademarks and copyrights and that sort of thing. We do post we do record, and everything is made available. And as such, there we go. I used to read that, but I guess I gave that up about 4 or 5 years ago. Seemed to take an awful lot of time. And kind of like when my bank put in 24-hour banking, I switched banks because I didn't have that much time. Okay, other quick announcements. Here are our upcoming shows. On the LUW side, it'll be next show on March the 11th, which is Jim Dean of Cigna is coming back to complete his 90-slide presentation on DB2 performance. That's a great user presentation. Jim's been in his job a long time and has a lot to share, and been doing a good job on that presentation and other ones that he's done. On April the 8th, I was waiting for one more confirmation mail back from Dale, but Dale McInnes is a very popular speaker. He's with IBM Canada, used to work in the lab, and he talks on a number of very technical topics relating to migration and recovery. And he's got a new pitch on AIX to Linux migration, which seems to be quite popular, and we're planning that for April the 8th. I'll have some more lab speakers on May the 6th and June 10th. I'm just waiting for names, abstracts, titles, and all that sort of thing before I fill that in. On the Z side, we have a presentation by Mike Cotignola of BMC Software on March the 18th, talking of the things that he wish he could remember from time to time when he's working with DB2, and he works with DB2 a lot, so it's kind of a fun thing. And we also have another very popular DB2Z speaker, and Cheryl Larson, who's been, I think she and I and Dave Belkey are there's 3 of us that spoke at the IDUG, the first IDUG in 1989 in Chicago, and Cheryl and I and Dave are still working away. And again, I'm just waiting for some information back on a couple of things. I've got some speakers nearly lined up for May 20th and June 17th, but again, that's further out. So I just wanted to make sure you had the dates if you want to put those on your calendar. Okay. As we always do, we mention DBI Software, the main and founding sponsor of the Db2Night show. And if you're interested in learning more about DB2 LUW performance, this demo is a good place to start off their website. And I'm interested with the number of customers I get involved with, there's always one company still looking at moving a substantial amount of work over to DB2 LUW, and they find this quite helpful to them. Our winner from last week is Jason McKernan of Shelter Insurance. He gets a nice gift certificate from Amazon. Thanks for watching, Jason. And that takes us to our sponsors, which is DBI and yours truly, Martin Hewell Consulting, Inc. I figured it out. I've been doing this for about 9 or 10 years now. Gosh golly, how time flies when you're having fun. And a little bit of humor this week. It seems we had another snowstorm last week. And this is actually not too hard, this one, because you can see the mirror and the window. So that kind of gives you an idea where the door is. It kind of takes the mystery out of this lump. But that's what the weather here in Toronto has been rather strange this week. We started off at minus 14 Celsius or minus 15 Celsius, which is about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Wednesday, we were up to 9 degrees Celsius, which is 45 or nearly 50 degrees on Wednesday. And today we're back down to minus 11 right now, which is 12 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you don't like the weather, come back tomorrow. Likely it will have changed. And with that, we've got just a few polling questions today. Just finding out the general things on function levels and which releases people are running in production. Getting that answered up. This looks like it could have updated this just a little bit more, putting more function levels on the top end, because I'm pleased to report, or it's looking so far, that almost we have everybody that is, oops, daisy. Let me close that poll and share the results. Virtually everybody's on Db2 V12, which is great news. We'll hide that, move on. How many years have you worked with Db2? I think we asked this question recently as well. It's interesting to see this. I think this year for me, Haakon, is 37 years. How about yourself?
Let me do the maths here. I think 36 for me.
No.
Yeah.
I'd put that down to age. I'm likely older than you.
I'm not so sure.
No. When your grandkids are mostly in their 20s, it points to something. All right, there we are. We've got a very experienced audience on the whole, and that's not surprising. But we love DB2, and we keep learning more, because one thing about DB2 is there's always more to learn. And I think that's all the questions I got for now. So I'm going to move forward and turn things over to you. Oops, this says a little break. We're not going to do a commercial break. We don't do that on the DB2Z shows, because we tell you who the sponsor is, and we leave everything to you folks. And I'll at this point turn things over to you, Haakon, and we can move on and get going here. So I'm making you the presenter now. That should open up. I've got the question queue open. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be monitoring that and I'll break in. But other than that, please take it away. And I'll mute myself so you don't hear any background noise.
Okay. Many thanks, Martin. It's a pleasure to be back here again and having the opportunity to talk about many of the great things that we have delivered through the maintenance stream for Db2 for ZOS utilities. And since this is utilities update, I'm not going to go too far back in time. I think if I were to talk about everything that had been delivered at GA in version 12 of Db2, and since then, we'd be here for the rest of the day. So although I'm hoping you will be pretty impressed with what we've achieved and delivered recently, this is literally just what we have delivered through the maintenance stream in the last 1, possibly 2 years. So the main focus is on what we've delivered in 2021 and beyond. It's going to be a pretty technical session going through each of the enhancements here, and my aim is to talk a bit about not just what we've done, but perhaps why we've done it, and explain the value proposition behind these items. You can see from the agenda, I'm going to start off with the reorg utility, then cover load and unload, rebuild index, backup and recovery, so copy and recover and modify recovery, and then run stats and anything associated with inline statistics, and then some general utilities enhancements and a very short summary at the end. So without further ado, starting off with the reorg utility, the first item here, and incidentally, you obviously will be able to see the replay of this, and I've listed the APAR numbers here, so you can easily go and find the relevant PTF, apply the PTF, and take advantage of these enhancements in your environment today. It's exceptionally rare that in our utilities we deliver an enhancement that is actually tied to a function level. So regardless of whether you're on version 12 M500 or whether you're right up to current on 510, you should be able to take advantage of the vast majority of these items that I'm talking about here. So the first item is a reorg performance item, where we can drive parallel bills of PIs, right? So for the partitioning index, we can now process these partitions in parallel, and we will do that only if no NPIs exist on the table. But it can be a significant performance boost for reorg table space. The second item here is associated with the fact that a lot of people are using reorg discard as a really cheap way of deleting data, old stale data from tables, because there's no logging for it. So rather than do it through an SQL delete, you just run reorg with the discard option, and we will throw away data that you want discarded. But if the table is in an RI relationship, then you can end up with check pending being set as a result of reorg discard running, because of course we want to ensure that that those RI relationships are still valid. So for customers who know what they're doing and know that the data that they are discarding is not going to violate any RI relationships, then now we've introduced a no check pend option. Prior to this, the reorg would finish and you'd be in check pending, and you'd have to go and run, well, you could of course run the check utility, but the most common thing to do would be to run the repair utility to go and reset check pending. Well, now you don't need to do that, so you basically avoid an application outage as a result of check pending being set. Moving on to the next slide, we've got a sort performance enhancement for the reorg utility associated with Z15, where we now support the new sort L capability from the Z hardware that DF sort supports. And we implemented our support of that through DF sort in the reorg utility for variable length record sorting, which means for the data sort on reorg. So not fixed length record sorting, which would be associated with the sorting of index keys, but this is a performance improvement for the sorting of data records being done by reorg table space. And this is governed by a new Zpalm utils use zsort. So you can apply the PTF, turn that Zpalm on, and then take advantage of this performance improvement if you're running on Z15 machines. The next item is associated with sort NPSI processing for reorg of partitions. So I'm not going to go into all the details and all the background regarding sort NPSI, but suffice to say that it's a performance improvement for how we handle NPIs when you are reorging subsets of partitions for range partition table spaces. And with sort NPSI active, even though you might be reorging just one partition, we will actually pass all of the NPI index keys through sort processing and build the NPI in one go. And the default, and it's governed by a Zpalm called Reorg Part Sort NPSI. And there's a separate utility parameter called sort NPSI. So you can govern it at the utility level or at the Zpalm level. And the default is auto, which basically says that the reorg utility will figure out what is the most efficient way of processing the NPI, and then we will decide whether to sort all of the index keys or not. So the options, the default is auto. The options are no, yes, and auto. Now, if we end up sorting all of the index keys, then that gives us the opportunity to gather statistics on the NPI, because we are seeing all of the index keys for the NPI, because we're passing all these index keys through to sort the index keys and then build the NPI in one go. So there are a number of customers who are looking at this and saying, I'm running reorg at the partition level, but I actually do want to gather statistics on the entire NPI, so I am going to set sort NPSI to yes, or the Zpalm to yes. But the way this worked is that even if you specify yes, there are still situations where the reorg utility would say, from a performance and overhead perspective, it makes no sense for us to sort all of the index keys before building the NPI. So even though you say yes, the reorg utility may still not use this particular process, and therefore you would not get the NPI statistics that you were hoping for. A typical example of this would be, I've got a billion row table and I want to reorg partition 5, and partition 5 has got 5 rows in it. Well, in that particular scenario, do you really want to pay the cost of sorting 5 billion, or a billion index keys and building the NPI just in order to save the cost of inserting 5 index keys into the shadow NPI at the end? Right? So that's a typical example where even if you said sort NPSI yes, the reorg utility would say no, we know better, and we're not going to do it because it's just not efficient to do it that way. However, we decided that for customers who truly do want to be able to, who are specifying sort NPSI yes, that we should actually honor it under all circumstances. Because if you say sort NPSI yes, you're basically saying you do want to sort these index keys, and presumably you are gathering NPI statistics as a result of it. And so if you say yes, you mean yes, and we will give you yes. So that is what PH 34403 does. All right, better handling of reorg inline image copies. So the A part number here, PI 75518, is pretty old, but the PTF is pretty new. And this came out during, actually at GA of version 12 of Db2. And it's associated with the fact that partition level image copies on reorg is becoming increasingly common. And in fact, with PBR RPN in version 12 of Db2, we require part level inline image copies. The problem is, if those inline image copies are being taken to tape, then each of those inline image copies needs to be open for write at the same time. So if you want to reorg 4,000 a table space with 4,000 partitions, you would need 4,000 tape units in order to process it. and not many customers have that configuration. So what we are doing here now is introducing a new IC limit parameter for the reorg utility, and also a Zpalm to govern it as well, that allows you to specify how many tape units you want to consume, effectively how many inline image copies you want to create, regardless of the number of partitions that are being processed. So with this, for example, you could say, I want to reorg this table space with 1,000 partitions, but maybe I've only got 5 tape units, so I'm going to specify 5 here. IC limit tape 5. You will get 5 inline image copies, and the data from those partitions are going to be spread across those 5 image copies. And we decided that although the primary concern here was tape, we would broaden this out to provide greater control of inline image copies in general, which is why you also see a separate IC limit here for DASD as well. So rather than combining this into one, what we wanted to do was provide the ultimate flexibility, which allows you to control either DASD or tape separately. So now you have complete control over the number of inline image copies that are being created. And the last point that I make here is, of course, what we're talking about here is putting multiple partitions of the same table space into the same inline image copy. But if I've got 10 partitions in my base table space and I've got a lob column, now potentially the reorg utility may end up dragging in 10 lob table spaces, and each of those has to be on a separate inline image copy data set. So there will still be a minimum number of inline image copies required that may simply not be possible based upon your configuration. All right, and here you can see an example of the messages that we can now issue associated with this. We will tell you the maximum and the minimum number of image copies that are required, and we will also issue a message indicating that the utility cannot allocate the minimum number of inline image copies that are required based upon either the utility parameter or the Zpalm setting. Right, on to the next slide. We have delivered in PH 25217 a really significant performance improvement for Reorg Index. Prior to this, when you run Reorg Index, we would extract the keys and write them out to a sysut1 dataset on disk and then read them back in again. Now we've introduced a new no sysut1 option where we are just going to pass the records directly in memory, so that we then build the shadow directly in memory without going through sysut1 on disk. And this, as you can see, can give a massive improvement in terms of both elapsed time and CPU consumption, up to 86% reduction in elapsed time and 61% CPU savings have been observed from using this new parameter. So we introduced this, as I said, with a no sysut1 parameter for the reorg utility, and we can also govern it through a Zpalm, so you avoid having to go and change all of your reorg index jobs to specify the parameter. In the next version of Db2, in the next version that is going to GA in the second quarter of this year, once you get to M500 in the next version, we are going to ignore what you specify on the reorg parameter or what the Zpalm setting is, and you will get no sysut1 behavior. So we wanted to be cautious in terms of rolling this out in the maintenance stream, but once you're on M500 in vNext, we're basically throwing caution to the wind and saying everybody is going to be getting this performance enhancement. Next item is minimizing application impact from reorg drain processing. So there's a situation where if the reorg utility actually attempts to do the drain on the very first log iteration, then it may be at that point in time we don't really have a clear picture of how much log processing is actually left to be done. So it may be that we prematurely decide to perform the drain and it results in an elongated outage because we have more log to process than we had anticipated. So with this APAR here on this slide, we are now saying that we don't have complete information to make the decision about whether to issue a drain on the first log iteration. So we're not going to issue it on the first log iteration. So you will see a minimum of 2 log iterations for reorg, for online reorg. And then for reorg inline copy processing, we reduced internal memory consumption. And we now, in the last APAR here, there are situations where we would pull in the log table space when reorging to convert to PBG, even when max partitions for the PBG is set to 1. So with max partitions set to 1, there is in fact no need to pull in the log table space because there's no way that any of the logs in that log table space are going to have to move to a separate log table space associated with another partition. So we've solved that problem in PH 18057. On the next slide, we have made a change to how NoBasic works when converting from basic to extended format page sets, i.e. from a page set that supports 6-byte RBAs and LRSNs to a page set that supports 10-byte RBAs and LRSNs. So the NoBasic Zpalm option is very commonly used. And the reason for it is that customers want to be able to convert to extended format, but then once you've converted to extended format, you want to prevent anybody from being able to convert it back. For example, through, for some reason, setting a reorg parameter to convert it back to basic format, and now potentially you can suffer an application outage because we can't store the 10-byte RBA or 10-byte LRSN into the basic format page set. So the problem with NoBasic is that we will try to convert, if you specify NoBasic, we will try to convert from basic to extended format. But if we couldn't convert for some reason, and a common case is that we don't support conversion from basic to extended format for clones, then we would end up causing the reorg to fail because it couldn't perform the conversion. So what we have done now in PH30652 is we've said, you know what, you want to run this reorg, NoBasic is set, we will try to convert. But if we can't convert, we will not fail the reorg. So the reorg will succeed, even though the conversion could not be done for whatever reason. And that mirrors, incidentally, the behavior of the extended value if the Zpalm was actually set to extended rather than NoBasic.
Haakon?
Okay.
Haakon?
Sorry?
I've
Yes.
got a couple of questions for you. Michael was asking, are the IC limit params being added to the templates?
No, the IC limit parameter is not on the template itself, it's on the reorg statement, so not on the template statement.
Okay.
So no is the answer.
And the next question from Brian, does reorg index improvement help with the regular reorg table space?
No, it's a performance improvement for reorg index, not for reorg table space.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So on to load and unload processing here. The first item, or in fact, the first 2 items are to do with improving concurrency between different utilities. The first one is online load. So load, resume, share level change. There's no reason why that shouldn't be compatible with an online reorg that's running. Similarly, online unload share level change. There's no reason again why that should be incompatible with online reorg. So we've solved those with the two first APARs on this slide. And then the third item is support for load pre-sort, where now you can take your input data and you can say pre-sort, and the load utility will sort that data into clustering order before loading that data into a table. So you avoid the need to go and sort that data yourself in a prior sort step, or reorg the table space after the load is completed. And this works incidentally for both DF sort and for Db2 sort if you're using Db2 sort instead. There's a subsequent APAR that I list here, PH34323, that delivers a significant elapsed time performance improvement for pre-sort processing. So if you're interested in load pre-sort, I'd recommend putting on PH34323 in addition to the enabling PTF. The next item here is a usability enhancement where there are certain, so the parallel option is a really nice performance improvement that we have delivered for the load utility that allows us to drive internal parallelism for conversion of input records into internal format before loading the data into the page set. So there are some scenarios where the parallel option is not valid. And so what we would typically do is we would fail the load and say, you specified this parameter, but this parameter isn't valid for use with span yes or format internal, whatever it happens to be. We decided that as a general strategy going forward, we want people to be able to standardize on a set of recommended utility parameters that you might choose for your Db2 environment. So that means that we need to be a bit more forgiving when a particular parameter is specified that you may consider to be best practice, but it simply doesn't work for that particular scenario or potentially for that particular type of page set. So what we've done here is an example of the implementation of that strategy, where we're saying even though you specify parallel, if we can't use the parallel option for a particular reason, that's no reason to fail the load. We should just continue with the load and let it succeed. And so that is what we're doing there. And then for customers who are using row change timestamp columns, they wanted the ability to be able to override Db2's allocation of a row change timestamp on load. And so that's what we implemented with override row change in PH25572. A while back in the load utility, we delivered support for a whole range of date, time, and timestamp formats. But one that came to our attention that was mentioned by a customer was the fact that it's possible to use a 3-byte decimal Julian date format. And so now we have a new date_p option that allows the load utility to support this particular date format. And so here you can see an example of it and the APAR that delivered that capability. We've got a new Zpalm that allows you to be able to govern whether the load utility can load into page sets that have been started read-only. We have got customers who want to prevent applications from updating page sets. These are reference page sets that applications should not be updating. And in order to control that, these page sets have been started read-only. However, you may want to run the load utility, for example, load replace, to replace the data in that table with a new set of data. Problem is that the load utility would not run against a page set that had been started read-only. Well, so the options then are basically to start it read-write. But if you start it read-write, then now suddenly applications could have the ability to update the page set, which is not what you want. The other option would be to start the page set for utility access. But if you started it for utility access, now suddenly you've incurred an application outage, which is not what you want either. So for this reason, we implemented a new load RO objects Zpalm, and the default is existing behavior, which is no. If you set it to yes, that tells the load utility that it can operate against a page set that is started read-only. And then because we have fixed up the force option for the reorg utility now, so it's really robust, we've had numerous requests from customers to support the force option for the load utility as well. So now on the drain that we perform for the load, you can specify whether you want the load utility to actually cancel threads that are holding claims against the object that may be preventing the load from acquiring the drain. And this works for normal load share level none, and it works also for load replace share level reference, i.e. what we would term online load replace, right? So the ability to do a load replace to replace data in the table while applications continue to read data from that table by employing shadow technology, which is something that we delivered a couple of years ago. Sticking with load for a bit longer, we've got some improvements for default if processing. So we now support not equals in addition to the previous equals that we supported. So you can now say, as an example here, if column 1 does not equal ABC, then replace it with the default value. And we also support substitution with the default value in the case of a conversion error. So we now support a default if specification of conv error, and both of those are delivered in the APAR that I mentioned here. And we've made an improvement for auth compatibility. So this is a new Zpalm in version 12 of DB2, where we had requirements for compliance reasons from customers who said, for the unload utility prior to version 12, all you needed was select authority. Well, not all you needed, but you needed select authority. And we had customers who said that for compliance reasons, they did not want to grant select authority to authorization IDs that were executing unloads. We needed a separate unload authority. So in version 12, we implemented a separate unload authority. But we didn't want to implement it in such a way that all the existing unload jobs start failing because you haven't granted unload authority where select authority currently exists. So that's why we have the auth compatibility Zpalm. But what we've done here now is we've said, if you say in the auth compatibility Zpalm, select for unload, then prior to this APAR, it would only work if you had select authority, not if you had unload authority. And what we've done now is we've said, if you specify select for unload on this Zpalm, then it will now work, the unload will work if you have either select or unload privilege against the table, which makes it much easier to start rolling out unload privileges for unloads. Okay, the next item is really fixing a problem that came to our attention where we've got inconsistent behavior when loading data, when loading decimal data with format external. So if you look at the example that I've got on the slide here, you're doing a load format delimited of a decimal column, and the input has got a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you specify load without format delimited, and you're not actually specifying a decimal point, then we will load 1234.56, which is what we should be doing. However, if you specify load with format delimited, exactly the same input, then what gets put into the table is 1234566.00, which is not correct. But it's the way it's been working for a very, very long time. So we decided we needed to fix this discrepancy. So we shipped an APAR that isn't on this chart to go and fix it. But we then had complaints from customers who said, you know, I'm used to the existing behavior, and now by applying this PTF, you've gone and changed the behavior just from applying the PTF. And we need a better way of controlling this particular change, controlling the rollout of this change in behavior. So what we actually ended up doing was PEing the original PTF and then shipping PH36908. And what this does is it introduces a new Zpalm called load delim implicit dec. And the default for this is no. So this way you can just apply the PTF and there is no change in behavior, right? You continue to have this discrepancy between load format delimited and load without format delimited. Okay. And we also introduced a flag in IFCID 25 so that you can turn on this particular trace IFCID 25, which traces utility executions, and you can have a look for this flag, and it'll tell you over time whether you're running any loads that have this exposure to this problem. So the recommendation would be run it over time and then correct the jobs, because at some point in the future, we may decide, we haven't made a decision at this point in time, but we may decide in some future function level to remove the Zpalm. Now, just to be clear, there are no plans at this point in time. So this same Zpalm, the same behavior is going to carry on working in vNext, right? And we are not going to ship a PTF that suddenly removes this, because we understand that it's been working this way for a very long time, but we want to alert people to this behavior and ideally change their jobs and potentially their applications so that we can fix this inconsistency. All right. But for now, you can just apply. You don't even need to worry. This PTF will go on, and there'll be no change in behavior. All right. Again, with a load utility, very recent PTF that we delivered is now the ability to support a consistent inline image copy for the load utility. Previously, if you ran load replace, for example, and you had RI on the table, or we had some unique key violation for a unique index, then we could end up removing rows that violated the constraint or the unique key violation, but they were not removed from the inline image copy. So if you go and have a look at the manual, it will say that the inline image copy really shouldn't be used for recovery purposes. Now we have fixed that in PH39300, so you will no longer see any warning that indicates that the inline image copy from load cannot be used for recovery, because it is truly consistent now with the data that is loaded into the table. And load better handling of part level inline image copies. So the issue here is if I want to load a subset of partitions, then I've got a couple of options for the inline image copy. I can specify a single image copy at the load statement level, at the table space level. But if I do that, now I'm serializing on the entire table space, which would prevent me from running other loads, for example, concurrently against other partitions. Alternatively, I can specify a separate inline image copy DDN at the partition level. But that means that now I've got to specify a separate image copy dataset for each partition. So I get an individual partition level image copy, which I might not want. And that can also cause problems if I'm taking these inline image copies to tape, as I mentioned previously with the IC limit enhancement for the reorg utility. So now what we're doing with PH40709 in order to solve this issue is we're allowing the specification of a copy DDN at the tablespace level will only serialize and copy the parts that are processed. It will no longer serialize on the entire tablespace. So now you can say, I want to just load partitions 3, 5, and 7, and I just want all of that in a single image copy date set, and it'll work without the need to serialize on the entire tablespace. All right, so moving off of the load non-load utilities here. So a change that we made in this APAR for Rebuild Index was again to say, you know, how can we improve usability of utilities? Well, for Rebuild Index, if you're running Rebuild Index against a table that happens to contain no data, then we used to end with a return code 4. But really, there's no reason to give you any warning to say that you're running Rebuild Index on a table that doesn't contain any data. You know, that's your prerogative. So we've changed it to now to end return code 0. And the relevant messages that we issue in the job output have been changed from warning to purely informational. For copy and recover utilities, well, the major item, the major news from last year was support for redirected recovery. The ability to recover a table, partition, or a table space from a source to a target, either to current or to any prior point in time. And to use this for testing out of recovery, for testing out of recovery time estimation, for forensic business analysis. Somebody wants to see, what did my table look like as of 3 p.m. yesterday? You can now do that by using the recover utility to recover that table to a different target with 0 impact on your business applications that continue to operate against the existing table. So this is a huge really expansion of the capabilities and use cases associated with a recover utility. And we followed it up with support for recover of indexes as well with PH35266. Okay, this is another slide that goes into a bit more detail, has some notes regarding the use of redirected recovery. You'll see we now issue some new messages. Interestingly, we decided for usability purposes that these are messages that are useful regardless of whether you're doing redirected recovery or not, right? It's really useful to get information about where we're recovering to and how many log records were actually processed by the recovery. So now you will see these messages on normal recovers, not just redirected recoveries. Okay, so I'm not going to go into any more detail on redirected recovery. You can go and look up further details on it on the website, and also have a look at the APARs and the PTF cover letters. Onto statistics. We want to simplify the sampling for run stats. So we want to again improve usability and performance for run stats. So we want to make it easier to run stats and not have people necessarily have to worry about, should I use row sampling? Should I use page sampling? What sampling rate should I use? So we introduced a new Zpalm called StatPGSamp. And the options for this are no, yes, or system. So if you say no, then we're just going to keep the existing behavior, right? So if you've asked for row sampling, you will get row sampling. You ask for a sampling rate of 40%, you'll get a row sampling with a sampling rate of 40%. No change. If you say yes, then by default, we will use table sample system auto. So if you don't specify anything, then with yes, we've changed the default to be table sample system auto, which means page sampling with an auto sampling rate. If you specify sample, So if the Zpalm is set to yes and the utility and the run stat specifies sample, then we will override it to do page sampling with an auto sampling rate. But if you're already specifying that you want page sampling, then we will not override it and we will use whatever sampling rates you've specified. So that's if the Zpalm is set to yes. And then there's a third option for the Zpalm. And the third option is the specification of system, which basically says that Db2 will decide. And what system means is that prior to function level 505 on version 12, system means no. So prior to function level 505, you just put on the PTF and there would be no change in behavior. But once you activate 505, if the Zpalm is still set to system, then the yes algorithm will take effect. So if you want to continue to keep your existing behavior, then all you would need to do is change the stat-pg-samp Zpalm to a value of no prior to activating function level 505 or beyond. Okay. Otherwise, just leave it at system, and it just means that we will start overriding row sampling, and you will start getting page sampling instead of row sampling, which is more efficient to reduce the overhead of gathering the statistics, obviously.
Haakon?
Yes.
I've got a few questions coming from one from Russell. The unload privilege, this is more of a requirement, I think. The unload privilege would be better if it worked at the table level rather than the database level.
Yeah, so Russell, send me an email about that, because I need to go back and have a look to see how that privilege was implemented. I can't remember the details.
Might be, as I say, it sounds like an RFE.
Yeah, that could well be.
And I got a couple from Brian here. Redirected recovery is a great enhancement with many uses. I just wish that redirected recover for index came at the same time. And in hindsight, redirected recover table space and then rebuild index is expensive. The redirected recover index would be useful.
Yeah. So what can I say? You know, like everybody else, we've got a finite amount of development resource. So and it was obviously we knew that we needed to support redirected recovery for indexes for customers who are image copying indexes.
Yes.
But it was absolutely clear that you know, image copying indexes is still, you know, a minority pursuit at this point in time. We'd love it if more people are image copying indexes and recovering indexes rather than rebuilding them. Sure. But nevertheless, you know, there's no question that redirected recovery of table spaces of the data was the top priority.
Yeah.
So you know, we finished the redirected recovery of the data. We moved immediately on to the index support.
Yeah. Here's another question from Brian, which is kind of interested. Redirected recover of table space instructions say we should always run repair table space catalog afterwards. While it's trivial, why doesn't it do this as part of the work? Why is that a separate step?
We already had that. So the answer is we already had that capability. And rather than fold all of that into the recovery utility,
right,
we decided that we would keep it separate. And one of the reasons why it might be worthwhile keeping it separate, so this is just to give you an example of why one of the considerations that we took into account when making that decision, was if all you're doing is using this for recovery time estimation, right? Mm. So you've got a production table. You just want to know if something goes wrong, how long is it going to take to recover this?
Right.
Well, you're doing the redirected recovery not because you want to query that target table later on, right? You just want to know how long that recover would take. So you wouldn't bother with repair catalog or anything like that. All you care about is just the raw recovery. So that's one reason why we felt it was a good idea to keep them separate. Quite apart from the fact that we didn't want to completely overload the recovery utility with other stuff that can be done later.
Mm. Yeah,
I mean, we've just to carry on with that thought, we've had similar questions from people who are saying, look, I'm doing a point-in-time recovery of this table, and then I need to go and rebuild my indexes. Why doesn't the recovery utility just go and rebuild the indexes afterwards, and for us? I think, we don't want to just pile all of this into the recovery utility. If you want an automated process that goes and rebuilds indexes after a point-in-time recovery, then recovery expert on the tool side will glue those steps together, or some other equivalent.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, and there's just some other chatter about the privileges. Unload is at the table level and load is at the database level, etc. So, but I think we'll leave it there and let you carry on. Yeah,
send me an email about that. I don't quite understand the comment about load is at the database level.
Yeah,
I mean, you're loading a table space or a partition, right? So
right.
But anyway, send me an email about it.
Talking about the load authorization, that's what they're talking about. So,
okay, I see. I see.
Yeah. So anyway,
send me an email and I'll respond. All right. So the future direction for gathering statistics is the use of statistics profiles, and so we felt it was important and a good usability enhancement that if you specify runstats use profile, we want to know what the profile looked like at the time that runstats ran. And so now we report that information in the job output. We've improved runstats performance and cut the memory consumption here for runstats by capping the count if you're using both and histogram. So we're basically saying here that if you use runstats with certain options, we will cap the amount of statistics that we are gathering and override it. Because from our perspective, it doesn't make sense to gather a lot of this information that is potentially being requested. And dynamic profile support. So from function level 507 onwards, runstats with a profile will gather the statistics that the profile specifies and delete from the Db2 catalog other statistics that is not part of the profile. Because our view is that whatever the profile specifies should be the totality of the statistics that you're interested in for any given table. So this helps avoid the situation of the Db2 optimizer having to deal with stale statistics, where there's a complete mismatch between a current set of statistics, that's a subset of what's in the catalog, and other stale statistics that are in the catalog that can throw the Db2 optimizer off. And we enhanced this for inline statistics for the reorg utility to perform the same behavior. So if you're using profiles for inline stats in the reorg utility, then in PH 16345, also from function level 507 onwards, we will delete any extraneous statistics that aren't part of the profile. And you can see the message that we issued to indicate that this has taken place. So a few general utility enhancements. We've got various utilities that when they operate, if that table is the source for a replication relationship, then the replication product will detect that the utility is run, and it will automatically drive a refresh of the target. And that process to drive a refresh of the target can be disruptive. So we've had customers who said, you know what, during the online day, I do not want to risk anybody running a utility that might trigger a refresh of a replication target. So we introduced a new Zpalm utils block for CDC that gives DBA control to prevent such utilities from running. So that's what we've delivered in this APAR, And so now you could potentially have a utility fail with this new DSNU 187I message indicating that the utility is not being permitted as a result of this Zpalm being set. Check share level change for customers who are using flash copy, then online check utilities running share level change will now reset check pending or what's check pending. We had customers who are using VUE who were seeing that DB2 was still being registered in SCRT MLC reports. And the reason for it was that the DSM copy utility was still registering with SCRT. So we've changed that in PH 15766, and we introduced a new repair write log option that allows other vendors to be able to write the diagnostic log record that I mentioned on the previous slide that would cause replication products to trigger a refresh of a target. Okay, so we've had this capability to write this particular diagnostic log record for years in our utilities. We've now provided this for other vendors to be able to write the same type of log record to better support replication. DSNA-COX, we've got a performance and scalability improvement here that we've delivered in PH 25108. We're going into great detail given the time constraints here. And we've got a template. So somebody asked about templates earlier on. We have a template enhancement to support the large block interface, which can give a significant elapsed time improvement when taking image copies to tape. So now the template supports a new block size limit parameter that can be specified in PH 30093. So that's a quick run through of a pretty extensive list of significant improvements that we've delivered to utilities through the maintenance stream just in the past year or so. And I just want to emphasize that this doesn't even include the work that the utilities team has performed in order to support various key DB2 engine improvements, such as what we delivered in function level 508 to support multi-table tablespace conversion to PBG, which of course has utilities implications for the reorg utility and backup and recovery capability as well, right? So we have a really exciting list of further improvements that we are working on for utilities. But I'm hoping that what I've taken you through in this session gives you a feel for the level of investment that we have in the utility space, and that a lot of the improvements that I've talked about are ones that you see to be attractive and can take advantage of in your shops even today. And for reference purposes, we have during the course of version 12 of DB2 with the advent of continuous delivery, massively improved our documentation regarding information about new enhancements being delivered in DB2, including the utilities. So I would recommend that if you want a more comprehensive list of what is being delivered through continuous delivery, not just for utilities, but for the rest of DB2 as well, then go and have a look at recent enhancements to DB212 in the IBM Knowledge Center, as well as keep an eye on the DB2 for ZOS news from the lab blog, where a lot of the improvements that I've been through today, we've written blog entries for to give you further information and also alert you to the fact that these improvements are coming out. Because if all you're doing is just applying RSUs on a regular basis, then it's entirely possible that you've missed the fact that a lot of these improvements are now available and you can take advantage of them today. Okay. So with that, any other questions, Martin?
Yes, we have a couple more here. One says the redirected recovery of indexes motivating me to copy indexes more often, which is probably just a good comment.
Yeah, I mean, Yes, I mean, in order to run redirected recovery, it's basically the recovery utility that's running, and recovery of indexes is going to require an image copy of the index. So yes, if you want to run that, then you need an image copy of the index.
Right.
So you're going to have to alter your indexes to support taking image copies of indexes and recovery of indexes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Couple of others, one from Phil. Can multiple recommendations from the statistics advisor be used to populate the statistics profile? And is there a guide to not, what's the right word, messing it up?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think that's a question that probably should be directed to index advisor.
Sure.
I mean, it does, of course, make sense.
Yeah.
That index advice be used as input to the creation of the profile. But today, the main creation of a profile is based upon the statistics that are currently residing in the Db2 catalog. Right? So one area that we're going to be looking at going forward is further dynamic profile support, where we're very good at adding additional statistics to profiles, statistics specifications to profiles. What we want to do is get to a stage where we can determine that some information in the profile actually does not make any sense based upon workloads that are running.
Right.
That's an area that we're going to be looking at going forward.
Right. Now, this is another question from Brian. This is an indirect utility question. I've followed this on DB2L this week. The alter index syntax includes a regenerate parameter. I don't understand why I would want to alter index regenerate. It is not stated in the IBM doc or in the Knowledge Center or the documentation. Apparently, after successful issue of alter index regenerate, we must then rebuild the index. So is there anything you can say on that in a short amount of time?
Yeah, no, I'd have to look into that. I don't have an answer to that question. So send me an email and I'll take a look and I'll respond.
Right. And the next question is, when will runstat share level change update all the RTS columns? Because share level reference is a real pain.
Yes, I can sympathize. However, there are no plans at this point for runstat share level change to go and update all the RTS information. And the main reason for that is we are fixated upon making RTS information more accurate rather than less accurate. So, so if runstat share level change is running, then we're scanning through the page set. There's nothing to prevent somebody from coming along and inserting 5,000 rows behind us and then committing. And then when runstats eventually finishes, we wipe out the fact that those 5,000 rows got inserted, right? So total rows is going to be less accurate rather than more accurate.
Yeah.
So no plans for that at this point.
And the final question I have, is there an online repository of all the changes in this presentation? I will say, before I pass that to you for further comment, that we will hopefully, from Haakon, you'll make your presentation available today, and we'll put that on the replay blog, I hope.
Yes, I will. And you know, as I mentioned, all I've done now is just go through what we've delivered just in the last 12 to 15 months. So I would urge people to go and have a look at that reference that I put on the last slide. Go and have a look at the IBM Knowledge Center, where we list all of the enhancements that have been delivered in DB2 version 12, DB2 core enhancements, as well as utility enhancements. And you will see there detailed information about what the enhancement is, how it can be enabled, whether it's through function level or through a particular A bar. So it's a really great source. But yes, for sure, we will make a copy of this presentation available.
Thanks. So let me take control back, and so I can do the wrap up here. And I'll make myself presenter, show my screen. And Hopefully everybody can see me now. And the last thing I'm going to do is ask our last question we always ask at the end of each show is, did you learn anything today? And we're getting people to vote quickly on that, so I'll close that off and say that our answer is 100% is yes. Yay, that's always a good thing to see.
That is a relief. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. So with that, we're well past the hour. I'm going to just put this over to our final page here. Oops. There we are. And I'll cue the music and thank you again several times before we end. And we'll move on and have yourselves a great weekend. Up here, it's a holiday weekend. I believe it might be may or may not be in various states, but certainly it is where I live. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time on the Db2Night show. March the 18th is our next show on Db2 LUW. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.